I think we forget sometimes how lucky we are to live in this great city, in this great country. I describe it all the time because I believe it as the greatest city and the greatest country in the world. And it's a day to celebrate the good fortune we have to be Canadians and to be Torontonians, but it's also a day to think about some things that have happened in our history that are not as good, such as the way we've treated Indigenous people, and I think we can continue to work on that and learn about that. And I think this year, it's a really important year to remember that our values are so important to us, how we treat each other, the fact that we sort of believe in peace, order, and good government, because we're seeing, even very close by here to our country, people's having their rights threatened and having their rights taken away. And we've got to protect the rights we have here because we value them so much as part of our way of life. And so I hope as people celebrate today, they keep those kinds of more serious things in mind, such as Indigenous people, how we can do better, such as protecting the rights that we have that have been so hard won for all people. And I just think that's an important thing for us to reflect on today. But most of all, I hope people are safe, that they have a good time, and that everybody engages in responsible behavior, because we've seen a bit of partying that gets out of hand, and that spoils it for everybody. And I just hope that that doesn't happen again. And I think most people have got that message, and certainly our wonderful police are going to help us with that. So on that note, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Mayor, you could see the Afghan Bazaar community, the kids behind you, beautiful traditional dress. You're a great ambassador for the city. Can you just talk about how important multiculturalism is here in the city of Toronto?
One of the great things about Canada, and I think it's almost unique in the world, but I won't claim it's the only place, but here you can be a proud Afghani and you can be a proud Canadian at the same time. We want people to bring their traditions and their culture and their heritage to this country and to join us in building this wonderful mosaic we've put together, where what we do is we don't worry about people's differences or try and change people. We say, no, we're going to benefit from who they are and from the differences that exist between and among different Canadians. And we've built a stronger country because we've done that. And so to me, to see these young people that are celebrating who they are, that are serving our community as proud Canadians, one at the same time, is a wonderful thing. It's the story of Toronto. It's the story of Canada. More than half the people in the city were born outside of the country, and thank goodness they decided to come here and make their life here.
And my last question, sir. When you speak with other leaders, I would say around the globe for that matter, is Canada recognized as the city that we all think it is? At Toronto, I should say, recognized the city.
I was just at the Collision conference, which was here in our city, and I didn't travel to get there. I just traveled to the exhibition place, and there were 120 countries represented there. And Torontonians would be proud of how they heard their city being talked about if they did hear it at that conference. And they were talking, yes, about they liked the way the city looked, the way it felt, they liked the food, they liked the entertainment, but most of all, they could recognize the diversity here, and they could recognize the values. They knew that we look after each other, that we respect everybody, that we embrace everybody regardless of their race or their color of skin or their sexual orientation, any of those things. And so people do know, we're not perfect, we have work to do, but they do know there's something special going on here, and the challenge is to make sure as we come out of the pandemic that we protect that as we recover. And that is something I'm very committed to doing, because we're not on the list of the 10 most livable cities in the world for nothing, but you have to keep it that way. Anytime you make it to the top of any list, you have to work at it to stay there, and so that's exactly what we're going to do as a city.
Mayor, you mentioned it, but once again, some people are concerned that the recognition of the Indigenous issues that we saw last year maybe isn't reflected as much this year. Your thoughts on that?
I think all of the different ceremonies now take into account the need to respect and to better understand the fate that has come about for Indigenous people in this country. But I think what I'm suggesting to people is they take just a few minutes on this day to learn something more. I was a history student at university, and they'd spent no time at all on Indigenous people and on their history and that part of our history, because that's part of our history, and some of it's not good. And so I think that people, if they took 10, 15 minutes, maybe if it rains sometime in the next day or two, just to look up on the internet. There's so many places to look now for information about Indigenous people and what they have been through, but also what they've contributed to this country being what it is. The kind of peaceful, respectful of nature values that are part of being a Canadian, those came from Indigenous people. It's deeply rooted in who they are. And so these are things we have to learn more about, because I think it will enhance our respect for them and also make us more determined than ever to make up through reconciliation for what we did to them, over many, many decades.
Are there any concerns that there might be multiple protests or anything like that? Is that on your mind?
I'm never concerned about protests as long as they're positive, as long as they're peaceful. You know, I mean, people help protest is a part of the rights that I've talked about that we should celebrate and protect. You know, rights are under threat in other parts of the world, not far from here, and so the right to protest is fundamentally a part of that. But the respectful nature of Canadians is such that we should protest peacefully. And I don't think there's any problem anybody has at any time with protest in the city. We've seen many, many protests over the last 2 or 3 years on a variety of subjects. Nobody has a problem with that, starting with me, at all. I encourage it. But people should remain peaceful, and by and large they do. And that's, I think, a tribute to Torontonians as well, that we can have these protests. They don't devolve into something that is either violent or hateful or disrupts the community. And I think those are all things that are very important.
Sir, last question. Can you speak about tonight's events? I know I've heard you in the past few days talk about the festivities going on tonight. Can you just go over that one more time?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you've seen the release, but I want to speak to it. There's a release out saying there's been some changes in the events tonight with the fireworks, and I perhaps might speak to that. We received notice as a city literally yesterday in the afternoon, and I was notified that the vendor who we dealt with for some time, and as close back as May 24th, was just not going to put on the shows. He just walked away from a contract we had with him, and so the city staff scrambled. They literally spoke with 20 different vendors, and I'm pleased to say that their work resulted in being able to have a fireworks display at Ashbridges Bay tonight as scheduled on Friday night. There's one that's going to be held at Stan Wadlow Park that will be held tomorrow night because the same vendor couldn't do the 2 nights in a row on a day's notice. Unfortunately, the one in Scarborough will have to be postponed, and we will put it on sometime later in the summer, in Scarborough to make sure. And the ones at Mel Lastman Square and Downsview will go ahead as scheduled because the same vendor wasn't involved in those ones. But I'll just say these are the kinds of things that happened, came out of the blue, and you don't know why it would have happened the day before, but it just did. And I'm pleased that the city staff did great work to make sure that we could maintain one at Ashbridges Bay. When people go to the fireworks displays, whether they're on Canada Day or any other day, I just plead with them to behave the way most Torontonians do. It was a very small group of people, hooligans really, on Victoria Day, that weekend, that ruined it for everybody. But they engaged as well in very reckless behavior that could have resulted in somebody literally dying because they were shooting fireworks at each other and at the police officers. And there's just no excuse for that. It's just not the kind of behavior that we would believe in here in the city of Toronto. So I encourage people, and I know I don't have to encourage the vast majority, to please just go and have a good time. Nobody's saying you can't have a good time. Have a good time. Be moderate on the consumption of alcohol because that sometimes contributes to these things, but no problem with any of that. Just don't engage in this kind of hooliganism that really ruins it for everybody and means the police have a difficult job to do. I'm pleased they're going to have a good solid presence in the different public places tonight in order to make sure that people keep safe, because that's in the end what our objective is always, is to make sure people can be safe.